Do you think any investigation will unfold, will occur?
Well, first of all, let me correct you. I'm not the chairman of the all-party group for Saudi Arabia. That's a Labour MP called Yasmin Qureshi. But I'm extremely concerned at the very one-sided, biased reporting of Newsnight of this extremely complicated war. And it seems that Newsnight and the BBC are determined to ignore the atrocities that the Houthi tribes have implemented in Yemen, the terrible brutality with which they have seized that country, the firing of mortars into Saudi Arabia itself from Yemen.
Let me help you. We're not in Saudi Arabia. Politicians don't get to determine what journalists are and are not allowed to do. Our investigation was conducted into the very simple question of whether weapons sold by British companies to Saudi Arabia had possibly been deployed in the commission of war crimes and the breach of international law. I think most people understood that, but I'm happy to clarify it for you. So I'll return, if I may, to the question that I asked you originally. Do you have much hope that a proper investigation will be launched into what has been happening in Yemen and what our films have displayed? The BBC, for the record, have also been in Aden and have also reported upon Houthi atrocities.
Well, I fundamentally dispute your coverage of the entire situation in Yemen, and you and Newsnight are trying to peddle a completely false prospectus to the British people of the situation on the ground.
I think there will be a proper international investigation into the possible commission of war crimes by Saudi Arabia. You can take all the time in the world to answer that question, sir.
The war crimes are being perpetrated by the Houthi tribes, not by Saudi Arabia. You know, you have an agenda at Newsnight, and you don't want anybody to dispute
Tell me what the agenda is.
The way in which you are covering this war.
What's the agenda?
You have an agenda.
BBC, committed by Saudi Arabia. The Houthis are not our allies.
Are acting in a completely disgraceful way.
Remarkable encounter.
Over the coverage of this war. Absolutely disgraceful.
I feel...
And yet you are trying to deliberately mislead the British people. The agenda is very different. I've been watching most of the day-to-day coverage from all sorts of news channels from around the world, and particularly from Al Jazeera and from Arab channels.
Yes.
And I can tell you that the coverage that they are giving of this war is very, very different to that of the BBC.
Well, tonight.
And I will answer for the upteenth time. The coalition forces of 10 countries are doing everything possible to limit civilian casualties, and the Newsnight are deliberately trying to falsify the situation on the ground in Yemen.